Hello! In this video, I'm here and I'm planning to look at the setInterval function in JavaScript. The setInterval function is a feature of native JavaScript. It exists for you in the browser that you could just use it without any other JavaScript library whatsoever. However, I'm going to demonstrate setInterval in the context of using also the p5.js JavaScript framework. So let's review for a moment. In my previous video, I looked at a function called setTimeout. The function called setTimeout was one where you would give the I'm gonna keep going. Sometimes I would start over, but I'm just gonna keep going. You would give that function two arguments. The first argument is the name of another function, in something like a function called rainbow, and the second argument is a time, the time at which you want that first thing, the rainbow function, to be executed. So this would result in this function rainbow happening 2,000 milliseconds or 2 seconds later. So the easy thing here is that, okay, well, you learned setTimeout, so why don't you learn now setInterval. SetInterval is actually basically exactly the same thing. The difference is, instead of executing rainbow once and only once, 2,000 milliseconds later, setInterval will execute the rainbow function over and over again every 2 seconds. Every 2 seconds. Rainbow, 1, 2, rainbow, 1, 2, rainbow, 1, 2, that sort of thing. So let's think about a context where that might be useful. So for example, and I'm gonna save this as, I should have done this, setInterval, and I'm gonna remove my code that I had from the previous example, just to sort of start over from scratch again, and I'm gonna run this code. So let's just say, here's a scenario that might be useful. Let's say you have some sort of interactive experience you've built for the web. There's an animation, there's a canvas, there might be a lot of other stuff, and you want to have separately from that a DOM element, a div, a paragraph, something that has a timer counting down, or something that's pulsing every few seconds with a changing color or something like that. So this is a nice place. So I feel like setInterval is useful if you want to animate a DOM element. Now, I'm feeling I got a little pit in my stomach here because there's also something called request animation frame, which in a lot of contexts, in particular in an animation context, becomes an important thing to know and look at. And I will get to that. I will consider that as a possibility. But right now, let's just stay and assume that there's never a problem with setInterval, and we can use it for the kinds of things that I'm going to demonstrate to you in this video. So let's say, for example, that I want to create I'm going to just call it a timer, for lack of a better idea, and I'm going to say timer equals create p, and I'm going to put just the text timer in it, and I'm going to run this, and you can see that now underneath my canvas I have a paragraph element with the word timer in it. Now, one thing that you are probably aware of is that, remember, draw is this thing that's automatically looping all over again, over and over again. And by the way, draw, I bet behind the scenes, it uses something called request animation frame. Just a suspicion I have. So I could say timer.html, and one of the variables you get for free, this is a p5 variable. Remember, setInterval is part of native JavaScript. Frame count, this variable that I'm using right here, is part of p5. If I add that in there, what I'm seeing in that particular DOM element is the number of times that draw has repeated, the frame count. So you can see that there is this element of setInterval happening, of this repeating action. That's the draw loop. But what if I want my program to do other things based on time separate from this 60 or 30 or whatever it is frames per second animation? This is where setInterval comes in and is useful. So let's say what I want to do is I want to say setInterval, and I'm going to make up a function called timeIt, and I'm going to say function timeIt, and that is where I'm going to say timer.html what. So what is the content I want to put in that HTML element? Let's make up another variable, counter equals 0. Let's update that DOM element to include the counter variable, and let's increase counter by 1. So setInterval, and let's do that every 500 milliseconds, so half a second. So you can see now this, even though there are two things going on, there are sort of two looping threads, the actual canvas animation is just managed by p5 and the draw function, and this particular DOM element is managed by me and my own use of setInterval. So there's a few roads down here that I might like to go on. Like first of all, you might think, okay, well, what happens if I want that DOM element to interact with going on the canvas? I could just reset the counter variable if I click on something. There's lots of possibilities here. But let's start with something that I think is probably the most useful, which is what if I want to start and stop this interval based on something else? So one thing that's really important about working with setInterval is the function not only starts this interval going, but actually creates a JavaScript object that stores a lot of information related to the interval. So I'm going to add a variable called interval and a global variable, and in setup, I'm going to set interval equal to set interval. So now when this function is executed, I have a reference to that interval. So if I ever wanted to stop it, for example, mouse pressed, I can say clear interval. So clear interval, by the way, this is also a function part of native JavaScript. And what this function allows you to do is clear the interval, meaning stop it. So here we go. And you can see that that interval is going. 1, 2, it's very hard for you to see because it's very tiny, but I can zoom in and see 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Now, when I click the mouse, I've cleared that interval and it's stopped at 19. So how would I click the mouse again and have it keep going? I think this is a perfect exercise for you to do if you're trying to practice this stuff. So what I might suggest, let me get you a few more steps along the way there. I'm gonna create a button. And I'm going to say start timer. And I'm going to say button.mousePressed. And I'll say start timer. And in start timer, I'm going to say interval equals set interval. And maybe I'll make another function called stop timer. Clear interval. Clear interval, the interval. Now, you can sort of see here now, if I'm running this, I already started it, right? So if I'm running this, you can see now I've made this extra button, and that button has a function attached to it when I click on it that actually makes the interval. So when I click on it, you can see that now the timer has started and it's counting up. So, right, so there's like a bunch of callbacks happening here because mouse pressed, when you press on it, triggers start timer, which triggers set interval, which triggers time it. So when do we call stop timer? So the easiest thing for you to probably do right now would be to create a second button, which is stop timer, and then the callback for that second button's mouse pressed would be stop timer. But I think an interesting thing that you might do is, what if there was only one button? Right? What if there was only one button? I just call this do timer, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to say button.html is stop timer. So that what's happening here is now when I look at this, when I click start timer, it's going to go here. Click start timer, it's going to go here, start the interval, and then change the HTML to stop timer. So you can see the timer is going, and the button's text is actually now changed to stop timer. So the next time I press the button, I want to clear the interval and change the timer back to start timer, that text. So I need some sort of Boolean variable or some sort of way of checking if the interval is going or not. And if it is going, I should clear it and change the text to start. If it is going, I need to clear it so that it stops and then change the text to start. If it isn't going, I need to start it and then change the text to be stopped, because that would be the next thing. So I'm going to leave that as kind of an open question. I will gladly, in the description of this video where I link to the code that goes with this video, I will gladly put the solution in there. And if you're following along and you go follow the links and it's not there, write in the comments of this video, because that just means I forgot, and I will add it right in. So hopefully this gives you a sense of how setInterval works and how it might be useful to you. But I thought of one more thing that is going to lead me to another video that I don't know whether or not I'll make it today, but it's an important question. Technical difficulty, but I'm back. And the point that I wanted to make is, here we are with this very simple scenario of a single DOM element, a single DOM element animating with counting up every 500 milliseconds. So what if I wanted to make another DOM element called timer2? And what I want is I want this one to also animate or also count up, but maybe at a different rate. Now, certainly, I could then have two counter variables. And I could also have, in addition to two counter variables, I could have two functions. I could have time at 1 and time at 2. And then I could call setInterval time at 1 at 500 and setInterval time at 2 at 1500. But there must be a way to just generically say this idea of having a DOM element change over time based on setInterval. I should be able to do that in a generic way by calling a function like animate DOM element with this value at this range. And to do that, you need something called a JavaScript closure. So this is a topic I've been threatening to cover at some point in a video, and I've slowly been wrapping my head around this like weird, strange concept that is actually quite elegant and simple in the end, but is a bit confusing to get used to this idea. So that's something that I will cover in the next video, I guess, because I think in my idea of making a video about using set timeout to play a melody, this idea of a closure, will also be relevant in that. Okay, so thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.